The town of Red Hollow had one unspoken rule. Women like Mara Whitlock didn't belong. A single mother with a newborn and no husband, she watched every door in town slam shut in her face. No work, no shelter, no mercy. Desperation pushed her toward Iron Ridge Ranch, where the most feared man in the territory lived behind locked gates. What happened next would shake Red Hollow to its core and prove that survival isn't about begging for acceptance. It's about refusing to disappear. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The stagecoach wheels kicked up dust that settled on everything. Mara's worn dress, the blanket wrapped around her daughter, the trunk she'd dragged across 3 territories. She stepped down onto Red Hollow's main street with legs that barely held her weight. The driver didn't wait. He tossed her trunk into the dirt and was gone before she could say thank you. Her daughter whimpered against her chest. 3 months old, still unnamed because Mara hadn't felt settled enough anywhere to make it official. Hush now, Mara whispered, adjusting the blanket. We're here. We made it. The town looked like every other frontier settlement, rough wooden buildings, a saloon that never closed, dust everywhere. But it was supposed to be different. Her mother's friend had written that Red Hollow needed workers, that opportunities existed for people willing to start over. Mara picked up her trunk and started walking. The first boarding house sat near the general store. A painted sign read, Mrs. Hartley's Lodging, clean rooms, fair rates. Mara climbed the steps and knocked. A woman opened the door, middle-aged, stern-faced, wearing an apron that had seen better days. I need a room, Mara said. Just until I find work. Mrs. Hartley's eyes dropped to the baby. You got a husband? No, ma'am. Then I can't help you. The door closed. Mara stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of the trunk cutting into her palm. She turned and walked to the next boarding house. Same conversation, same result. By the 3rd rejection, Mara's hands were shaking. By the 5th, she wanted to sit down in the street and cry. But crying wouldn't feed her daughter or put a roof over their heads. The sun was setting when she tried the last place, a ramshackle building on the edge of town. The owner didn't even open the door all the way. We don't take your kind, he said. What kind is that? The kind that brings shame. Mara wanted to argue, wanted to explain that shame was something other people decided to carry, not something she'd earned. But the door was already closing. She walked back toward the main street, exhausted and terrified. Her daughter was crying now, hungry and tired. Mara had a little money left, enough for maybe 3 days if she was careful. After that, nothing. She sat on a bench outside the general store and tried to think. The baby's cries grew louder. People passing by looked at her with expressions that ranged from pity to disgust. Nobody stopped. You look lost. Mara looked up. An older woman stood there, holding a basket of vegetables. Her face was lined and weathered, but her eyes were kind. I'm trying to find a place to stay, Mara said. And work. Any kind of work. The woman studied her. You got turned away everywhere? Yes, ma'am. Expected. Red Hollow's got ideas about how women should behave. She shifted her basket to the other arm. But there might be one place, if you're desperate enough. I am. Iron Ridge Ranch, about 5 miles north. They're always short-handed in the kitchen. Mara's hope flickered. Why doesn't anyone want to work there? Because Silas Mercer owns it. Man's got a reputation that scares off most folks. The woman paused. He's hard, doesn't tolerate mistakes, runs that ranch like a prison, but he pays fair and he doesn't ask questions. How do I get there? Follow the north road until you see the ridge. Can't miss it. The woman looked at the baby. Word of advice, don't lie to Mercer about anything. He'll know. Thank you, Mara said. What's your name? Eleanor Pike. I run the bakery when I'm not minding other people's business. She smiled slightly. Good luck. You'll need it. Mara waited until morning. She spent what little money she had on bread and milk, then started walking north with her daughter strapped to her chest and her trunk balanced on one shoulder. The road was rough. Every step sent pain shooting through her legs. Her daughter fussed and squirmed, uncomfortable in the heat. Mara kept walking. After 3 hours, she saw it. A ridge of dark rock rising against the sky. Below it sprawled a ranch larger than anything she'd expected. Fences stretched in every direction. Cattle dotted the distant fields. Buildings clustered near the main house, solid and well-maintained. Mara walked through the open gate. Ranch hands working near the barn stopped to stare. None of them smiled. She followed the path to what looked like the main house. Before she could knock, the door opened. A man stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, with gray threading through dark hair. His face was hard, carved by weather and time. He looked at her with eyes that missed nothing. "You lost?" His voice was rough, like gravel under boots. "No, sir. I'm looking for work." "Don't need workers." "I can cook, clean, whatever you need." "Said I don't need workers." Mara's throat tightened. "Please, just listen." He started to close the door. "I'll work for free," she said quickly. "1 week, no pay. If I'm not good enough, I'll leave." That stopped him. He looked at her again, slower this time. His gaze moved from her face to the baby to the trunk beside her feet. "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm out of options. Because every place in Red Hollow turned me away. Because I need to prove I'm worth something." Silence stretched between them. "1 week," he said finally. "You get room and board, nothing else. After that, we'll see." Relief hit her so hard she almost stumbled. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Kitchen's through there." He pointed to a building off to the side. "Cook's quarters are in the back. You'll start breakfast tomorrow at 4. 4 in the morning? Men eat at 5. You got a problem with that?" "No, sir." He studied her one more time. "What's your name?" "Mara Whitlock." "Silas Mercer." "Don't make me regret this." He closed the door. Mara picked up her trunk and walked to the kitchen. It was larger than she'd expected, with a massive stove, shelves packed with supplies, and a table scarred from years of use. The back room held a narrow bed and a wooden crate that could serve as a cradle. She set her daughter down carefully, then sat on the bed and let herself breathe. They had a place. For 1 week at least. That was more than they'd had yesterday. Mara spent the rest of the day organizing the kitchen and trying to understand what she'd walked into. Ranch hands came and went, eyeing her with suspicion. Nobody spoke to her except to grunt requests for coffee or water. At 4 the next morning, Mara lit the stove and started cooking. She made biscuits from the flour and lard she found, scrambled 3 dozen eggs, fried salt pork until it was crispy, and brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead. The men filed in at 5. 15 of them, rough and tired, smelling of horses and dirt. They sat without speaking, ate what she'd made, and left. Not one of them said thank you. Silas came in last. He took a plate, ate standing up, and walked out without a word. Mara cleaned the kitchen until it shone. The next day was the same, and the day after that. She cooked, they ate. Nobody acknowledged her existence. Her daughter cried often, and Mara learned to work with one hand while holding the baby in the other. On the 4th day, she decided to change tactics. She'd been cooking simple, functional meals, the kind of food that filled stomachs but didn't invite conversation. That morning, she made her mother's biscuits, the real ones, the recipe that required patience and timing and a touch that couldn't be taught. She also made gravy from scratch, thick and peppery, the way her mother had made it on winter mornings when the world felt too cold to face. The men came in at 5. They sat down, started eating, and then, "What the hell is this?" one of them said. Mara's stomach dropped. "Biscuits and gravy." "I know what it is. I'm asking why it tastes like my grandmother made it." The other men were staring at their plates. One of them, a younger man with a scar across his cheek, looked up at her. "This is real food," he said quietly. "Better than what we've had in years," another added. For the first time, the silence in the kitchen felt different. Not hostile, just surprised. Silas came in last, like always. He took a plate, ate standing up, and paused. "Where'd you learn to cook like this?" he asked. "My mother." "She teach you anything else?" "A few things." He nodded once and left. That night, one of the ranch hands knocked on her door, the young one with the scar. "Ma'am, name's Cody. Just wanted to say, that was the best breakfast I've had since I left home." "Thank you," Mara said. "Some of the others think so too. They just won't say it out loud." After he left, Mara sat on her bed and let herself feel something close to hope. The rest of the week passed faster. Her cooking improved as she learned what the men liked and what supplies she had to work with. She made stews that stretched ingredients, bread that stayed fresh for days, and desserts on the nights when she sensed morale was low. The ranch hands started talking to her. Not much, but small comments, requests, questions about when she'd make something again. On the seventh day, Silas came into the kitchen after dinner. "Your week's up," he said. Mara's heart sank. "I know. You staying or leaving?" She looked at him confused. "You're good at this," he said. "Better than the last 3 cooks combined. You want the job? It's yours. Wages are $12 a month, room and board included." $12. It wasn't much, but it was more than nothing. "Yes," she said. "I'll stay." "Good. One more thing." "What?" "If anyone in town asks, you tell them you work here. You don't apologize, you don't explain. You work here. That's all they need to know." "Why would I need to explain?" Silas's expression darkened. "Because Red Hollow has opinions about women living on ranches full of men, and those opinions get loud. I don't care what they think. You will, but by then it'll be too late to leave without trouble." He turned to go, then stopped. "Fair warning. Vernon Crow owns half this town. He hates me. He'll hate you by association. Keep your head down and do your work." "Who's Vernon Crow?" "Man who thinks he owns everything, including people." After Silas left, Mara stood in the quiet kitchen and realized what she'd stepped into. This wasn't just a job. It was a war she hadn't known existed, but she'd survived worse, and she wasn't leaving. The first real trouble came 2 weeks later. Mara had gone into town for supplies. She walked into the general store with a list Silas had given her and enough money to pay for everything. The store owner looked at her with barely concealed disgust. "You're the woman from Iron Ridge," he said. "Yes, I need these supplies." He glanced at the list. "Can't help you." "Why not?" "Store policy, we don't serve women of questionable character." Mara felt her face flush. "I work at the ranch. I'm buying supplies for the kitchen." "Don't care. Get out." She tried 2 other stores. Same result. By the time she walked back to the ranch empty-handed, she was shaking with anger. Silas listened to her explanation without expression. "Expected," he said. "Crow probably told them to refuse you." "Why?" "Because he wants me to fail, and you're an easy target." "What do I do?" "Nothing. I'll handle the supplies." He paused. "But this is just the start. It'll get worse." He was right. Within days, the whispers started. Mara heard them when she passed people on the road, saw the looks when ranch hands went into town. The judgment was everywhere, invisible and suffocating. One evening, a man named Tom, one of the older ranch hands, sat at the kitchen table after dinner. "You doing all right?" he asked. "Fine," Mara lied. "Town's talking about you." "I know. Don't let it get to you. They're just bored and mean." He hesitated. "For what it's worth, you've done more for this place in a month than anyone else in 5 years. The men respect that." "Do they?" "Yeah, even if they don't say it." He stood to leave. "Just keep your head up, and don't let Crow scare you." But Mara had never met Vernon Crow. She didn't know what he looked like or why he hated Silas so much. That changed a week later. She was in the kitchen when she heard raised voices outside. She looked through the window and saw a man standing in the yard, well-dressed, clean, with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. Silas stood across from him, arms crossed. "You can't keep her here," the well-dressed man was saying. "It's indecent." "She works for me, that's all." "A woman alone with 15 men? People are talking, Mercer." "Let them talk. I'm giving you a chance to fix this before it becomes a real problem. The only problem here is you standing on my land telling me what to do." The man's face darkened. "You're making a mistake." "Wouldn't be my first." The man left. Silas watched him go, then turned and saw Mara in the window. Their eyes met. He didn't say anything, just walked away. That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She knew who the man was now, Vernon Crow, the one Silas had warned her about, and she knew, with certainty, that this was only the beginning. Her daughter stirred in the makeshift cradle. Mara picked her up, held her close, and whispered the only promise she knew how to keep. "We're not leaving. No matter what they say, we're not leaving." Outside, the wind howled across the ridge, cold and unforgiving. But inside the kitchen, the stove still held warmth from the day's cooking, and Mara Whitlock, the woman Red Hollow wanted to erase, stood her ground. The morning after Crow's visit, Mara found a dead crow nailed to the kitchen door. She stared at it for a long moment, then pulled the nail out and tossed the bird into the scrub. Her hands didn't shake. She'd seen worse. Inside, she started breakfast like nothing had happened, but when Silas came in for coffee, he noticed the nail hole in the wood. "Someone leave you a present?" he asked. "Just a bird." "That's not just a bird. That's a message." He poured coffee, his jaw tight. "Crow's testing you, seeing if you'll run." "I won't. I know." He drank, then set the cup down harder than necessary. "But he doesn't know that yet, which means it'll get worse before it gets better." Mara cracked eggs into a bowl. "How much worse?" "Depends on how stubborn you are." "Very." For the first time since she'd arrived, Silas almost smiled. "Yeah, I figured." The ranch hands came in for breakfast. They ate quickly, talking in low voices about fence repairs and a sick calf. Mara noticed they avoided looking at the door, which meant they'd already seen the nail hole. Word traveled fast on the ranch. After they left, Tom lingered near the stove. "You need anything?" he said quietly. "You let us know." "I'm fine." "Didn't ask if you were fine, asked if you needed anything." Mara looked at him. Tom was maybe 50, weathered and rough around the edges, but his eyes were steady, honest. "Thank you," she said. He nodded and left. Her daughter started crying from the back room. Mara wiped her hands and went to pick her up. The baby was fussy, red-faced, and squirming. Mara changed her, fed her, tried to soothe her. Nothing worked. "I know," Mara whispered. "I don't like it here either, but we're staying." By midday, the baby's crying had escalated to screaming. Mara had work to do, bread to bake, vegetables to prep, dinner to start, but she couldn't put her daughter down for more than a minute without the screaming starting again. She was trying to knead dough one-handed when Cody appeared in the doorway. "Ma'am, you need help?" "I'm managing." "Doesn't look like it." He stepped inside, hesitant. "I've got 5 younger siblings. I know babies." Mara hesitated, then handed her daughter over. Cody took the baby awkwardly, then shifted her until she was cradled against his chest. The screaming stopped almost immediately. "She just wanted to be held different," he said. Mara stared at him. "How did you—" "Like I said, 5 siblings." He rocked gently, and the baby's eyes started to close. "You finish your work. I'll walk her around." For the next hour, Cody paced the kitchen with her daughter while Mara got caught up. The other ranch hands wandered in and out, saw what was happening, and said nothing. But Mara noticed the looks they exchanged. Not judgment, something closer to approval. When the baby finally fell asleep, Cody handed her back carefully. "She's a good kid," he said. "Doesn't cry for no reason." "No, she doesn't." That evening, during dinner, Mara made cornbread with honey butter. It was a small thing, but the men noticed. One of them, a hard-faced man named Garrett, who never spoke, looked up at her. "This is good," he said. 2 words. But from Garrett, it felt like a speech. After dinner, Mara was cleaning when she heard horses outside. She looked through the window and saw 3 men riding up to the main house. They wore clean clothes and carried themselves like people used to being obeyed. Silas met them in the yard. Mara couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw the tension in Silas's shoulders. Saw the way one of the men gestured toward the kitchen. They talked for maybe 10 minutes. Then the men left, and Silas stood alone in the yard, staring at nothing. Mara waited. When he didn't move, she stepped outside. "What did they want?" "To warn me. Crow's filing a complaint with the county. Says I'm running an immoral establishment." "Because of me." "Because he's looking for any excuse to cause problems." Silas finally looked at her. "They're calling for an inspection. County officer will come out next week to assess the situation." "What does that mean?" "Means they'll look for reasons to shut me down. Safety violations, moral violations, anything they can twist." He rubbed his face, suddenly looking older. "I've been through this before. Crow tried it 5 years ago with different accusations. I survived, but it cost me." "What do you want me to do?" "Keep working. Keep your head down. And when the inspector comes, be respectful. Don't give them ammunition." "I won't." but Silas didn't look convinced. Mara, if this gets too bad, if staying here puts you in real danger, you need to leave. I'll give you money. Help you get to another territory. I'm not leaving. You don't understand what Crow's capable of. I understand that running away doesn't solve anything. I've been running my whole life. I'm done. Silas studied her for a long moment. You're going to regret that. Maybe, but at least I'll regret it on my own terms. The next few days were tense. Ranch hands worked longer hours, making sure everything was perfect for the inspection. Mara scrubbed the kitchen until it gleamed. She organized supplies, checked dates on everything, made sure there wasn't a single thing out of place. On the 5th day, disaster struck. One of the younger ranch hands, a kid named Lucas, who couldn't have been more than 17, was repairing fence wire when something went wrong. Mara heard the shouting from the kitchen and ran outside. Lucas was on the ground, blood streaming down his face. The wire had snapped and caught him across the eye. "Someone get the doctor," Garrett was yelling. "Town's an hour away," Tom said. "He'll bleed out before we get back." Mara pushed through the crowd. "Bring him inside, now." They carried Lucas into the kitchen and laid him on the table. Mara's hands moved automatically, tearing cloth for bandages, boiling water, grabbing the bottle of whiskey from the shelf. "Hold him down," she ordered. "What are you doing?" Cody asked. "Saving his eye if I can. Now hold him." She cleaned the wound as carefully as possible. The cut was deep, running from his eyebrow to his cheekbone, but the eye itself looked intact. "This is going to hurt," she told Lucas. He nodded, teeth clenched. Mara poured whiskey directly into the wound. Lucas screamed and thrashed, but the men held him steady. She worked quickly, using techniques her mother had taught her: how to clean without causing more damage, how to stitch when thread was all you had, how to pack a wound so it would heal straight. When she finished, Lucas was pale and shaking, but conscious. "You're lucky," Mara said. "Another inch and you'd be blind." "Thank you," he whispered. She bandaged his face properly, then stepped back. Her hands were covered in blood. So was her dress. The ranch hands were staring at her. "Where'd you learn that?" Garrett asked. "My mother was a midwife. She taught me field medicine." "That wasn't field medicine," Tom said. "That was surgery." Mara didn't respond. She just started cleaning the blood off the table. Lucas recovered faster than anyone expected. Within a week, he was back to light work. The scar would be permanent, but his eye was fine, and every time someone asked him what happened, he told the same story. Mara Whitlock saved his sight. Word spread through Red Hollow like wildfire. Mara didn't know it was spreading until she went into town for supplies again. This time, Eleanor Pike was the one who stopped her. "People are talking about what you did for that boy," Eleanor said. "I just helped him." "You did more than help. You gave him his future back." Eleanor glanced around, then lowered her voice. "But you should know, Crow's using it against you, saying you're practicing medicine without training, saying you're dangerous. That's insane. Doesn't matter if it's true, matters if people believe it." Eleanor handed her a small package. "Bread. On the house. And a word of advice, be careful. Crow doesn't like losing, and right now you're making him look foolish." The county inspector arrived on a Thursday. He was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a notebook he consulted constantly. Silas showed him around the ranch while Mara stayed in the kitchen, trying to look busy and unthreatening. The inspector spent 2 hours examining everything: the bunkhouse, the barn, the supplies. Finally, he came to the kitchen. "You're the cook?" he asked Mara. "Yes, sir." "How long have you worked here?" 6 weeks. "And you live on the premises?" "In the back room, yes." He wrote something in his notebook. "Are you married?" "No." "Children?" "One daughter, 3 months old." More writing. "And the father?" Mara's jaw tightened. "Not here." "I see." He looked around the kitchen, opened cabinets, checked the stove. "Everything appears clean, well organized." "Thank you. However," he closed his notebook. "The living arrangement is highly irregular. A single woman residing with multiple unmarried men creates an environment of questionable morality." "I'm the cook." "They're ranch hands. There's nothing questionable about it." "That's not for you to decide." He turned to Silas, who had been standing in the doorway. "Mr. Mercer, I'm recommending that you terminate this arrangement. Find a male cook or build separate housing for female staff. She's the best cook I've ever had, Silas said flatly. That's irrelevant. It's extremely relevant. My men work better, eat better, and stay longer because of her. I'm not firing her because the town has outdated ideas about propriety. The inspector's expression hardened. Then I'll be forced to file a report recommending sanctions. File whatever you want. She's staying. After the inspector left, Silas came into the kitchen. Mara was gripping the edge of the table, trying not to shake. I'm sorry, she said. Don't apologize. You didn't do anything wrong. You're costing me nothing. Crow would have found another excuse if you weren't here. He poured himself coffee. This is about him, not you. Don't forget that. But it was hard not to take it personally, especially when 2 days later a group of women from town arrived at the ranch. Mara saw them coming from the kitchen window, 5 women in their Sunday best, walking up the road like an army. She wiped her hands and went outside to meet them. The woman in front was maybe 40, with a pinched face and cold eyes. You're Mara Whitlock? Yes. I'm Mrs. Caroline Voss, president of the Red Hollow Ladies Society. She looked Mara up and down. We're here to discuss your situation. What situation? Your presence at this ranch. It's causing scandal. Mara crossed her arms. I work here, that's all. A woman alone with men? That's never just work. Mrs. Voss stepped closer. You have a child. Think of what example you're setting. I'm setting an example of survival. You're setting an example of sin. The words hit like a slap. Mara felt her face flush, but she kept her voice steady. I think you should leave. We're trying to help you. There are proper places for women like you. Homes where you could work respectably. I'm working respectably. Not in the eyes of the community. Mrs. Voss glanced at the other women, who nodded in agreement. If you truly cared about your daughter's future, you'd remove yourself from this situation before it's too late. Mara wanted to scream, wanted to tell them exactly what she thought of their judgment and their hypocrisy. But she remembered Silas's warning, don't give them ammunition. Thank you for your concern, she said coldly, but I'm fine where I am. Mrs. Voss's expression turned ugly. You won't be for long. Mark my words. They left. Mara stood in the yard, hands clenched, fighting tears of pure rage. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the conversation, thinking of all the things she should have said. Her daughter slept peacefully in the cradle, unaware of the storm gathering around them. Mara got up and went into the kitchen. She needed to do something with her hands, something productive. She started baking. Bread first, then pies with the last of the dried apples. She worked through the night, channeling her anger into dough and filling. At dawn, the kitchen smelled like heaven. The ranch hands came in for breakfast and stopped in their tracks. What's all this? Cody asked. Breakfast, Mara said. An extra for later. They ate like starving men. Even Garrett smiled. When Silas came in, he looked at the spread, then at Mara. You okay? He asked quietly. No, but I will be. What happened? She told him about the women, about Mrs. Voss and her threats. Silas listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker. They came onto my land to harass you. They said they were helping. They were threatening. There's a difference. He finished his coffee. This is escalating faster than I expected. Crow's mobilizing the whole town against you. Why does he care so much? Because I wouldn't sell him this land. He offered twice what it's worth 5 years ago, and I said no. He's been trying to destroy me ever since. Silas looked at her directly. You're just the latest weapon he's found. So what do? We fight back, but not the way they expect. He paused. You know anything about the county fair? No. Every year there's a cooking competition. Prize is $50 and a blue ribbon. More importantly, it's judged publicly, in front of everyone. His eyes sharpened. Crow's sister-in-law has won it for the last 12 years. You want me to enter? I want you to win. Show the town you're not what they think you are. Mara considered it. It was risky, public, exposed, but it was also a chance to prove something. When is it? 3 weeks. I'll do it. Silas nodded. Good. But Mara, if you do this, you're declaring war. There's no going back. There was no going back the moment I walked into this town. Over the next 3 weeks, Mara prepared. She tested recipes, refined techniques, studied everything she knew about cooking and presentation. The ranch hands became her unofficial tasting panel, offering feedback that was surprisingly helpful. "Needs more salt," Garrett said one night. "The crust is good, but the filling's too sweet," Tom added. Even Cody had opinions. "My ma used to add a little vinegar to her berry pies, cut the sugar, made it taste brighter." Mara took notes on everything. Silas watched from the sidelines, saying little but observing everything. Once, late at night, she found him in the kitchen while she was testing a new bread recipe. "You don't have to do this," he said. "Yes, I do." "Why?" She didn't answer right away. Finally, she said, "Because if I don't, they win. And I can't let them win. Even if it costs you everything?" "I don't have anything to lose. That's what they don't understand." The day of the fair arrived. Mara dressed carefully in her best dress, still worn, still patched, but clean. She packed her entry into baskets and loaded them into the wagon. Her daughter stayed at the ranch with Cody, who'd volunteered to watch her. Silas drove her into town. Neither of them spoke much. The fairgrounds were packed. Booths selling everything from tools to fabric lined the field. A stage had been set up for the judging, and everywhere, people, hundreds of them. Mara carried her baskets to the registration table. The woman there looked at her with barely concealed disgust. "Name?" "Mara Whitlock." "Ranch?" "Iron Ridge." The woman wrote it down slowly, making sure everyone nearby heard. Whispers spread immediately. Mara ignored them. She set up her display: fresh bread, berry pie, smoked meat prepared with a spice rub her mother had taught her. Simple food. Honest food. The kind that told a story. The other entries were elaborate: fancy cakes with icing decorations, multi-layered pastries, dishes that looked more like art than food. Mrs. Lucinda Crow, Vernon's sister-in-law, had the largest display. Crystal dishes, gold-trimmed plates, everything designed to impress. She looked at Mara's simple spread and laughed. "How quaint," she said loudly. The judges started making their rounds. 3 of them, local officials who clearly knew which side their bread was buttered on. They tasted Mrs. Crow's dishes first, praising everything effusively. When they reached Mara's table, the crowd had gone quiet. "What do we have here?" the lead judge asked. "Fresh bread, berry pie, and spiced venison," Mara said. He tasted the bread first. His expression shifted slightly. He tried the pie, then the venison. The other judges did the same. Nobody spoke. "Simple preparations," the lead judge finally said, "but well executed." They moved on. Mara waited while they judged the rest. The sun was hot. The crowd pressed closer. She could feel the weight of their stares. Finally, the judges conferred. Whispered conversations, glances back at the displays. The lead judge stepped onto the stage. "This year's winner," he announced, "is Mara Whitlock of Iron Ridge Ranch." The fairgrounds exploded. Some people cheered. Most just stared in shock. Mrs. Lucinda Crow's face went white, then red, then something close to purple. Mara couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She'd expected many things: humiliation, rejection, maybe even sabotage. But not this. Never this. The lead judge walked over and handed her the blue ribbon and an envelope with the prize money. "Congratulations," he said quietly. His eyes held something she couldn't quite read. Warning, maybe, or regret. "Thank you," she managed. Mrs. Crow was suddenly beside them, her voice pitched loud enough for everyone to hear. "There must be some mistake. Perhaps the judges would like to reconsider." "No mistake," the lead judge said firmly. "The decision is final." "But surely you noticed, Mrs. Crow." The judge's tone went cold. "The decision is final." She turned on Mara instead. "You think winning a ribbon changes anything? You're still what you are, and everyone here knows it." Mara met her eyes. "What am I exactly?" "A woman with no shame, no morals, no—" "Lucinda." Vernon Crow appeared out of the crowd, his hand closing on his sister-in-law's elbow. "That's enough." He looked at Mara with an expression that made her skin crawl. It wasn't anger, it was calculation, like he was reassessing a situation that had just become more complicated. "Congratulations on your win," he said smoothly. Quite unexpected. Thank you. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of you around town now, won't we? It wasn't a question. It was a threat dressed up as courtesy. Silas materialized at Mara's side. We're leaving. They walked through the crowd in silence. People moved out of their way, but Mara could feel the stares burning into her back. Some looked impressed. Most looked angry. All of them looked like they were watching something they didn't understand. In the wagon, Silas didn't speak until they were a mile outside town. You did it, he said finally. I won. You did more than win. You made them see you. He glanced at her. But Crow's going to come after you now, harder than before. I know. Are you ready for that? Mara looked down at the blue ribbon in her hands. It was just fabric and ink, but it felt like proof, evidence that she existed, that she mattered. I'm ready, she said. Back at the ranch, the men were waiting in the yard. When they saw the ribbon, Cody let out a whoop that echoed across the ridge. You won, he shouted. Tom grinned, showing teeth Mara had never seen before. Even Garrett nodded, which from him was practically a celebration. That night, Mara cooked a feast. She used some of the prize money to buy supplies she'd been rationing and made everything she'd been saving for a special occasion. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes with real butter, fresh vegetables, and 3 different pies. The men ate like it was their last meal. They laughed and joked and told stories, and for the first time since arriving at Iron Ridge, Mara felt like she was part of something instead of just working for it. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, she found Silas sitting on the porch. Mind if I sit? She asked. It's your porch, too. She sat, holding her daughter who had woken up hungry and restless. The night was cool, stars scattered across the sky like spilled salt. Thank you, Mara said, for pushing me to enter. You would have found your way there eventually. Maybe. Maybe not. She adjusted the baby's blanket. Why did you really suggest it? Silas was quiet for a long moment. Because I've watched this town crush people for 20 years. Good people. People who deserved better. I wanted to see someone fight back and win. He looked at her. And I knew you could do it. How? Because you're stubborn and angry and you don't quit. He smiled slightly. Reminds me of someone. Who? Me. 20 years ago. They sat in comfortable silence. Mara's daughter fell asleep against her chest, warm and solid. What did Crow do to you? Mara asked. Before. You said he tried to destroy you 5 years ago. Silas's expression darkened. He wanted this land because it sits between 2 of his properties. Would have given him control over the entire northern valley. When I refused to sell, he went after my reputation, spread rumors, filed complaints, made sure every business in town knew that dealing with me meant trouble. He paused. He got my wife to leave. Mara looked at him sharply. You were married? For 3 years, Catherine. Good woman. But she couldn't handle being isolated from her family, her friends, everyone she knew. Crow made sure of that, turned her own sister against her. Eventually she decided I wasn't worth the fight. He stared out at the darkness. She left on a Tuesday. Didn't even pack everything, just gone. I'm sorry. Don't be. She made her choice. I made mine. He stood up. Get some sleep. Tomorrow starts early. Mara watched him go, understanding him a little better now. He wasn't just helping her. He was fighting his own war through her victory. The retaliation started 3 days later. Mara went into town for supplies and found the general store closed. Not temporarily, permanently. A sign in the window read, "Out of business." Eleanor Pike found her standing there, staring. Crow bought him out, Eleanor said. Yesterday. Told him to close down or face consequences. Because I won? Because you embarrassed his sister-in-law in front of the whole county. Eleanor shifted her basket. There's a new store opening next week. Crow's cousin owns it, and I guarantee you won't be welcome there. How am I supposed to buy supplies? Same way Silas has been doing it for years, the next town over. Or you order through the mail and wait 6 weeks. Eleanor touched her arm. I'm sorry, this isn't fair. Nothing about this is fair. But Mara adapted. She learned to make do with less. She started growing vegetables in a small plot behind the kitchen. She traded with passing traders, bartering or cooking for supplies. It was harder, more work. But she managed. The social isolation was worse. Women who had ignored her before now went out of their way to show their contempt. They crossed the street to avoid her, turned their backs when she approached. Once, when she was walking past the church, someone threw a rock that hit her shoulder hard enough to bruise. She kept walking. The ranch became her entire world. She cooked, cleaned, cared for her daughter, and watched the seasons change through the kitchen window. The men tried to help. They brought her wildflowers they found while working, fixed things around the kitchen before she even asked, defended her in town when they heard people talking. But it wasn't enough to stop the pressure building. 2 months after the fair, Silas received an official letter from the county. Mara was in the kitchen when he came in, his face like stone. "What is it?" she asked. He handed her the letter. It was full of legal language she barely understood, but the core message was clear. Vernon Crow had filed a formal complaint claiming that Iron Ridge Ranch violated county ordinances regarding proper housing for female employees. The ranch had 30 days to either build separate housing or terminate her employment. "Can he do this?" Mara asked. Mara sat. "He just did." Silas sat heavily at the table. "Building separate housing would cost more money than I have. And even if I could afford it, it would take months. The law gives me 30 days. So I have to leave. Unless we find another option." They sat in silence, both knowing there was no other option. Not one that worked. Not one that didn't involve either bankruptcy or surrender. That night, Mara lay awake trying to figure out what to do. She had the prize money saved. Maybe enough to get to another territory, start over somewhere Crow's influence didn't reach. But the thought of leaving made her physically ill. She'd finally found a place where she belonged, where she was valued, where her daughter could grow up surrounded by people who cared. And Crow wanted to take it away simply because he could. No, not simply because he could. Because she dared to exist in a way that challenged his control. The anger that had been simmering for months finally boiled over. The next morning, Mara found Tom in the barn. "I need to know something," she said. "That land complaint Crow filed, is it real? Does the law actually say what he claims?" Tom looked uncomfortable. "It's real. Old law from territorial days, but nobody enforces it anymore, not unless someone makes a fuss." And Crow made a fuss. "Yeah. What happens if I just stay? If I ignore the order?" "Crow can get the sheriff involved. Silas could face fines, maybe worse." Tom paused. "It's not worth it, Mara. Sometimes you have to walk away." "I've walked away from everything my entire life. I'm done walking." She spent the day thinking, planning, trying to find a solution that didn't involve surrender. By evening, she'd made a decision. She found Silas in his office, reviewing ledgers that clearly showed more expenses than income. "I want to fight the complaint," she said. He looked up. "How?" "Publicly. In front of the county board. Force them to justify why a law that nobody enforces suddenly matters now." "You think they'll listen?" "I think if we don't try, Crow wins by default." She stepped closer. "You told me to fight back. That's what I'm doing." Silas studied her. "You understand what you're asking for? You'll have to stand in front of the entire county and defend yourself. Crow will tear you apart." "Let him try." "Mara, I'm not asking your permission. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. You can support me or not. But I'm fighting." For the first time since she'd known him, Silas smiled, really smiled. "Then we'll fight." The county board met every third Tuesday in the courthouse basement. It was public, which meant anyone could attend, which meant Crow would be there, and so would everyone else in Red Hollow who wanted to watch the show. Mara prepared like she was going to war. She reviewed every detail of the complaint, every word of the law being cited. She wrote down everything she wanted to say, then memorized it until she could recite it in her sleep. The night before the hearing, she couldn't eat. Her stomach was twisted in knots. Her daughter sensed her tension and cried for hours. Cody found her pacing the kitchen at midnight. "You're going to do fine," he said. "You don't know that." "Yeah, I do, because you're the toughest person I've ever met. And Crow's about to find out what happens when he picks a fight with someone who doesn't scare easy." "I'm terrified." "Being scared doesn't mean you're not tough. It means you're smart enough to know what you're up against." He picked up her daughter, who immediately stopped crying. "We're all going to be there tomorrow. The whole ranch. You won't be alone." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Save it for after you win. The courthouse basement was packed, every seat taken, people standing along the walls. Mara recognized faces from town, shop owners, farmers, families who had never spoken to her but had plenty of opinions about her. Vernon Crow sat in the front row, flanked by his sister-in-law and two men in expensive suits who were probably lawyers. He looked calm, confident, like a man who'd already won. The county board consisted of 5 men, all middle-aged, all property owners. They sat behind a long table at the front of the room, looking uncomfortable with the crowd. Silas sat beside Mara. The ranch hands filled the rows behind them: Tom, Cody, Garrett, Lucas with his scarred face, and a dozen others. Their presence felt like armor. The board chairman called the meeting to order. "We're here to address a complaint filed by Mr. Vernon Crow regarding violations at Iron Ridge Ranch," he said. "Mr. Crow, you have the floor." Crow stood. He didn't need notes. He spoke like a man used to being believed. "Gentlemen, the facts are simple. Territorial law clearly states that female employees working on properties with male staff must be provided separate, appropriate housing. Iron Ridge Ranch violates this law by housing a single woman in the same building as 15 unmarried men. This creates an environment of moral impropriety and sets a dangerous precedent for our community." "Mr. Mercer has 30 days to comply," one of the board members said. "What more do you want?" "I want enforcement, real enforcement, because if we allow this violation to continue, we're telling every business owner in this county that laws are optional." Crow's voice hardened. "And we're telling our daughters that living among unmarried men is acceptable behavior." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. The chairman looked at Silas. "Mr. Mercer, your response?" Silas stood. "The law Mr. Crow cites hasn't been enforced in 20 years. Nobody builds separate housing anymore because it's impractical and expensive. My cook lives in a room attached to the kitchen, completely separate from the bunkhouse. She has privacy, safety, respect." "That's not the point," Crow interjected. "Then what is the point?" Silas shot back. "Because from where I'm standing, this looks like harassment dressed up as moral concern. How dare you?" "Gentlemen," the chairman raised his hand, "this isn't productive. Does Miss Whitlock wish to speak?" Mara's heart hammered. She stood on shaking legs. "Yes," she said. "I do." The room went silent. Every eye turned to her. She walked to the front, facing the board, but aware of the entire crowd behind her. Vernon Crow watched her with an expression that said he'd already decided what she was worth. "My name is Mara Whitlock," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "I've worked at Iron Ridge Ranch for 4 months. In that time, I've cooked every meal, maintained the kitchen, and done my job with 0 complaints from anyone actually at the ranch." "The issue isn't your work performance," one board member said. "Then what is the issue? Because Mr. Crow says it's about housing. But if that were true, why wasn't this a problem until I won the county fair? Why wasn't it a problem for the male cook who worked there before me? Why is it only a problem now?" Crow stood. "Because the previous cook was a 60-year-old man. The situation was entirely different." "Different how?" "A kitchen is a kitchen. A job is a job. A young woman living among rough men is not the same as—" "I'm not young. I'm 26. I'm not naive. And those rough men you're so concerned about treat me with more respect than anyone in this room." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. "Miss Whitlock," the chairman said carefully, "surely you understand the appearance this creates." "I understand that appearance matters more to you than reality. I understand that you'd rather see me homeless than housed improperly. I understand that my daughter and I are supposed to disappear quietly so nobody has to feel uncomfortable. That's not what we're saying." "Then what are you saying? Because I followed every rule, worked harder than anyone, proven myself over and over, and it's still not enough. It will never be enough. Because the real problem isn't where I sleep or who I work with. The real problem is that I exist at all." The silence was absolute. Crow's face had gone dark. This is exactly the kind of inappropriate behavior. What's inappropriate? Mara turned to face him directly. Defending myself? Speaking truth? Or just refusing to apologize for surviving? You have a child out of wedlock. You live in sin. I have a daughter I'm raising alone because her father was a coward who abandoned us. That's not sin. That's reality. And if you want to judge me for it, fine. But don't pretend this is about protecting anyone's morals. This is about punishing me for not being ashamed. Miss Whitlock, one of the board members said, his voice tight. You're out of order. Am I? Or am I just finally saying what everyone else is thinking? She looked at each board member in turn. You can enforce this law. You can force me to leave. But we all know what that really means. It means Vernon Crow snapped his fingers and you obeyed. It means that one powerful man can destroy someone's life because he lost a petty competition. She paused. And it means that every woman in this county better hope she never needs a second chance. Because if she does, she'll remember what you did here today. The room erupted, people arguing, shouting, some agreeing with her and others calling for order. The chairman banged his gavel repeatedly. Enough, he shouted. Everyone quiet down. It took several minutes for the chaos to settle. Mara stood at the front, legs trembling but back straight. The board members conferred in whispers. Finally, the chairman spoke. We'll take this under advisement. Decision will be announced in 1 week. That's unacceptable, Crow said. The law is clear. 1 week, Mr. Crow. This meeting is adjourned. People filed out slowly, still arguing in clusters. The ranch hands surrounded Mara immediately, forming a protective wall. That was incredible, Cody said. Was it? I might have just made everything worse. You told the truth, Tom said. That's never wrong. Outside, Eleanor Pike caught Mara's arm. That took guts, she said quietly. Real guts. Half the women in there wanted to cheer, but were too scared to do it in front of their husbands. Did I change anything? Maybe. Maybe not. But at least now they can't pretend they don't know what's really happening. Eleanor squeezed her hand. Whatever happens, you stood up. That matters. Back at the ranch, Mara collapsed on her bed. Her entire body ached. Her mind raced with everything she'd said, everything she should have said, everything that might happen next. Her daughter started crying. Mara picked her up, holding her close. I don't know if I did the right thing, she whispered. I don't know if we're going to be okay. But I tried. I really tried. The baby didn't answer, just grabbed Mara's finger with her tiny hand and held on. The week that followed was torture. Every day felt like waiting for a verdict in a trial where she'd already been found guilty. The ranch hands tried to keep things normal, but tension hung over everything like smoke. On the 6th day, Silas received another letter. Not from the county board, from a lawyer representing Vernon Crow. Mara read it twice, not believing what she was seeing. He's suing you, she said, for damages related to the housing violation. And he's demanding immediate removal of you from the property. Not in 30 days. Immediately. Silas crumpled the letter. He's trying to force the issue before the board makes their decision. Can he do that? With enough money and the right lawyer? Yeah. He can do whatever he wants. That night, Mara sat in the kitchen long after everyone had gone to bed. The stove was cold. The dishes were done. Everything was quiet, except for the sound of her own breathing. She thought about running, taking her daughter and the prize money and just disappearing into another territory. Starting over somewhere Crow's reach didn't extend. But even as she thought it, she knew she wouldn't do it, couldn't do it. Because running would mean admitting defeat. It would mean accepting that people like Crow got to decide who deserved dignity and who didn't. And Mara Whitlock had spent her entire life accepting things she shouldn't have accepted. She was done accepting. The door opened. Silas stood there, looking older and more tired than she'd ever seen him. Can't sleep either? He asked. No. He sat across from her at the table. I've been thinking about options, ways out of this. There aren't any. There's one. He met her eyes. We could get married. Mara stared at him. What? If you were my wife, the housing complaint disappears. The lawsuit disappears. Crow would have no legal ground to stand on. That's insane. It's practical, and it would solve the problem. Silas, I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not asking for anything except a legal arrangement that protects both of us. He leaned forward. You need a home. I need a cook and someone who isn't afraid to fight. We make it work by making it official. Mara's mind spun. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you're loyal, brave, stubborn as hell. I know you make the best biscuits I've ever tasted, and you saved Lucas's eyesight when no doctor could. He paused. And I know that if Crow destroys this ranch, I lose everything I've spent 20 years building. But if he drives you away, you lose the only home you've managed to hold on to. So maybe we stop letting him win. By getting married. By getting married. Mara looked at this man she'd worked beside for 4 months. He wasn't offering romance. He was offering survival. A business arrangement dressed up as matrimony. But it was also respect, partnership, a chance to stay. What about your wife? She asked. Catherine. What if she comes back? She won't. And even if she did, that's been over for years. I've moved on. Have you? Enough to know I'd rather have someone who fights beside me than someone who runs at the first sign of trouble. Mara thought about her daughter sleeping in the next room, about the kitchen that felt like home, about the men who had become family without either side planning it. If we do this, she said slowly, we do it honestly. No pretending it's something it's not. No expectations beyond what we agree to. Agreed. And if either of us wants out, we figure it out, like adults. Fair. She took a breath. Then yes. Let's get married. Silas nodded once. I'll make the arrangements. We'll do it before the board meeting, before Crow can stop us. After he left, Mara sat alone in the dark kitchen, wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life or the smartest decision she'd ever managed. Either way, there was no going back now. They married 2 days later in the county clerk's office. No ceremony, no guests, just signatures on paper and a clerk who looked at them like they were making a terrible mistake. Mara wore the same dress she'd worn to the board meeting. Silas wore clean work clothes. The whole thing took less than 10 minutes. Congratulations, the clerk said flatly, handing them the certificate. Outside, standing in the dusty street, Mara looked at the paper in her hands. Mrs. Mara Mercer. The name felt foreign, like a coat that didn't quite fit. You okay? Silas asked. I don't know yet. Fair enough? He took the certificate and folded it carefully. We should tell the men before word spreads. They rode back to the ranch in silence. Mara kept glancing at the ring on her finger, a simple gold band Silas had produced from somewhere. It was slightly too big and slid around when she moved her hand. The ranch hands were gathered in the yard when they arrived, clearly waiting for news. Silas climbed down from the wagon and faced them. Mara and I got married this morning, he said simply. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Cody whooped, Tom started laughing, and even Garrett cracked something that might have been a smile. About damn time, Tom said. We were wondering when you'd get smart. It's not like that, Mara started to say, but Cody was already shaking Silas's hand. Congratulations, boss. You got yourself a good one. I know. They meant well, but their assumptions made Mara's stomach knot. This wasn't a love story. It was a strategy, and the distance between those two things felt enormous. That night, after dinner, Silas found her in the kitchen. We need to talk about sleeping arrangements, he said. Mara's face went hot. I assumed I'd stay in my room. You can, but people will talk if we're not sharing a space. Gives Crow ammunition. He rubbed his neck, looking uncomfortable. The main house has 2 bedrooms. You could take the second one. We'd be under the same roof. Separate rooms, but it would look proper. And my daughter? She comes too, obviously. Mara considered. The main house was larger, warmer, better built than the kitchen quarters. It made sense, even if it felt strange. Okay, she said. We'll move tomorrow. Good. And Mara? He paused at the door. This doesn't have to be weird. We're business partners now, that's all. But it was already weird. Because somewhere between agreeing to marry him and actually doing it, the nature of everything between them had shifted. They weren't employer and employee anymore. They weren't quite friends. They were something undefined, and that ambiguity made every interaction feel loaded with meaning that probably wasn't there. Moving into the main house took less than an hour. Mara didn't own much. The second bedroom was simple, bed, dresser, window overlooking the ridge. She set up the cradle in the corner and unpacked her mother's recipe book, setting it on the dresser like a talisman. Her daughter seemed to sense the change and cried most of the night. Mara walked her through the unfamiliar house, whispering reassurances neither of them believed. In the morning, she went to start breakfast and found Silas already in the kitchen, coffee brewed and bacon frying. You don't have to do that, she said. Neither do you, but here we are. He poured her coffee. Figured we'd work together on meals now. Share the load. It was a small gesture, but it felt significant, like he was trying to redefine the rules between them. They worked side by side in comfortable silence, falling into a rhythm that felt natural. By the time the ranch hands arrived, breakfast was ready. The men noticed immediately. "Boss cooked," Lucas said, grinning. "Marriage already changing things." "Don't get used to it," Silas said, but there was no bite in his tone. After breakfast, Mara was cleaning when Tom pulled her aside. "Listen," he said quietly, "I know this marriage is probably more practical than romantic, but for what it's worth, Silas is a good man. He doesn't show much, but he cares. You could do worse." "I'm not looking for romance." "I know. Just saying, sometimes things that start practical turn into something else, if you let them." Mara didn't know how to respond to that, so she just nodded. The news spread through Red Hollow faster than fire. By afternoon, Eleanor Pike showed up at the ranch with a basket of bread and a knowing look. "So you married him," she said. "News travels fast." "Always does." Eleanor set the basket down. "Smart move. Crow can't touch you now." "That was the idea." "He's going to be furious." "I know." Eleanor studied her. "You love him?" "I respect him." "That's a start. More than a lot of marriages have." She paused. "But be careful. Crow doesn't lose gracefully. He'll find another angle." "Let him try." But Eleanor's warning proved accurate. 3 days after the marriage, Silas received a letter from Crow's lawyer. Mara watched him read it, saw his expression darken. "What now?" she asked. "He's challenging the marriage, claiming it's fraudulent, a legal sham designed to circumvent county ordinances." "How can he prove that?" "He can't, but he can make the accusation and force us to defend it, which means more hearings, more legal fees, more time and money we don't have." Mara felt fury rising in her chest. "He's never going to stop, is he? Not until I'm bankrupt or you're gone, preferably both." "Then we need to stop playing defense. We need to go after him." Silas looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean, he's been using the law as a weapon because nobody's ever challenged him back." "What if we did? What if we found something he's hiding and made it public?" "That's dangerous." "Everything about this is dangerous. At least this way we're not just sitting here waiting for the next attack." Silas considered. "I'd need to know what we're looking for." "So would I. But there has to be something. Men who use power the way Crow does always have something to hide." It was Tom who provided the first lead. He came to the house that evening, hat in his hands, looking uncomfortable. "I heard you talking this afternoon," he said, "about finding something on Crow." "And?" Silas asked. "I might know something, can't prove it, but I've heard rumors." He glanced between them. 5 years ago, when Crow tried to buy this ranch, he didn't just make one offer. He made 3. Each time the price went up, but the third offer never came from him directly. Came through a shell company, fronted by his cousin. "Why does that matter?" Mara asked. "Because that cousin now owns half the businesses in Red Hollow, including the new general store, and I've heard talk that Crow's been funneling money through those businesses, avoiding taxes. Maybe worse." Silas leaned forward. "How sure are you?" "Not sure enough to stake my reputation on, but sure enough to think it's worth looking into." "Who else knows about this?" "Anyone who's been paying attention, but nobody wants to say it out loud. Crow's got too much power." After Tom left, Mara and Silas sat at the kitchen table thinking. "Even if it's true," Silas said, "proving it would take resources we don't have. We'd need records, documents, evidence that would stand up in court. What about the county recorder's office? Don't they keep business filings?" "They do, but walking in and asking for Crow's records would tip him off immediately." "Then we don't ask, we just look." Silas smiled slightly. "You suggesting we break the law?" "I'm suggesting we use public records for their intended purpose." They went to the county seat 2 days later. The recorder's office was a small building attached to the courthouse, staffed by a bored clerk who barely looked up when they entered. "Help you?" he asked. "We'd like to review business registration records," Silas said. "What years?" "Last 10. The clerk sighed and pointed to a back room. "Everything's filed by year and then alphabetically. You can look, but you can't remove anything." They spent 4 hours going through records. It was tedious work, page after page of business registrations, property transfers, partnership agreements. Mara's eyes burned from reading handwriting that ranged from neat to illegible. But slowly, a pattern emerged. Vernon Crow's name appeared frequently, but never on the same documents as certain businesses. Instead, those businesses were registered to relatives, friends, associates. Yet the addresses were the same, the signatures witnessed by the same people, the timing suspiciously coordinated. "He's hiding ownership," Mara said quietly. "Looks like it. But why?" "Tax avoidance, probably. If he doesn't officially own the businesses, he doesn't pay taxes on their profits, but he still controls them." Silas made notes, careful and precise. They couldn't take the documents, but they could record what they found. The clerk appeared in the doorway. "You two about done? I close in 20 minutes. "Almost," Silas said. They worked faster, grabbing whatever information they could. By the time they left, they had enough notes to build a case. Not a perfect case, but a starting point. On the ride home, Mara felt something close to hope. "What do we do with this?" she asked. "We take it to someone who can use it. Someone Crow can't intimidate." "Who?" "The territorial governor. He's been trying to crack down on corruption for years. This is exactly the kind of thing he'd want to know about." They sent the information by courier the next morning, along with a detailed letter explaining everything they'd found. Then they waited. Waiting was torture. Every day felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to see if the ground would hold or crumble. The ranch hands sensed the tension but didn't ask questions. They just worked harder, stayed closer, made it clear through actions rather than words that they stood with Silas and Mara. Mara threw herself into cooking. She made elaborate meals that took hours to prepare, bread that required multiple risings, stews that simmered all day. Anything to keep her hands busy and her mind occupied. One evening, she was kneading dough with more force than necessary when Silas came into the kitchen. "You're going to beat that dough to death," he said. "It can take it." He poured coffee and sat at the table, watching her work. "We might lose this fight. You know that, right?" "Yes. And if we do, you'll lose your home. Again." "I know. So why are you still here? You could have left weeks ago, taken the prize money and disappeared. Why stay?" Mara stopped kneading. Her hands were covered in flour. She looked at him directly. "Because leaving would mean accepting that people like Crow get to decide how the world works. That women like me don't deserve stability unless we're quiet and grateful and invisible." She slammed the dough onto the table. "I'm tired of being invisible. I'm tired of apologizing for existing, and I'm tired of powerful men thinking they can erase me because I'm inconvenient." Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You're the stubbornest person I've ever met." "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is one." Something shifted between them in that moment. Not romance, but recognition. They were both fighters, both too stubborn to quit even when quitting made sense. Her daughter started crying from the other room. Mara went to get her, and when she came back, Silas had finished kneading the dough and set it to rise. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Neither did you. But here we are." The response from the territorial governor arrived 3 weeks later. Silas opened the letter with Mara standing beside him. She watched his expression shift from hopeful to disappointed to something harder. "What does it say?" "He's launching an investigation. Says our information is credible enough to warrant official review." Silas kept reading. "But investigations take time. Months, maybe years. And in the meantime, Crow's still free to do whatever he wants. But it's something. It's a maybe, not a solution." Mara took the letter and read it herself. The governor's language was careful, political. He acknowledged the concerns, promised thorough investigation, but offered no immediate protection or relief. "We can't wait years," she said. "I know. So what do we do?" Silas folded the letter. "We survive, day by day. And we don't give Crow any more ammunition." But Crow had already found his next weapon. The lawsuit was delivered 2 days later. Not about housing violations or fraudulent marriage. About something Mara had never even considered. She was reading the legal papers when her hands started shaking. "He's claiming I'm an unfit mother," she said. "That living on a working ranch around rough men exposes my daughter to danger. He's petitioning the court to remove her from my custody." Silas grabbed the papers, read them twice. His face went pale. "He can't do this." "He just did. We'll fight it. Get a lawyer. Prove he's lying." "With what money? We're barely holding on as it is." Mara sat down heavily. And what if he's right? What if I am putting her in danger by being here? You're not. She's safe, loved, cared for. But can I prove that in court, against a man with unlimited resources and half the county supporting him? Silas didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. In a legal fight against Vernon Crow, they were outgunned and outmatched. That night, Mara held her daughter and cried for the first time since arriving at Iron Ridge. Not from fear, from rage, because Crow had finally found the one weapon that cut deeper than anything else. He was threatening to take her child. The next morning, she went to find Tom. "I need advice," she said. "Real advice. Not comfort. Shoot. If you were in my position, fighting a custody case with no money and no connections, what would you do?" Tom thought carefully. "I'd make sure everyone in that courtroom saw who you really are. Not what Crow says you are. I'd bring witnesses, character testimony, proof that your daughter's thriving." "That's it?" "No, I'd also make sure everyone understood what Crow's really doing. He's not protecting a child. He's punishing a woman who embarrassed him. Make that clear enough, and even his supporters might hesitate." "How?" "Same way you did at the board meeting. Tell the truth, loudly, publicly. Make it impossible for people to pretend they don't see what's happening." Mara spent the next week preparing. She asked the ranch hands to write statements about her character, her parenting, the environment she'd created. Every single one of them did. Even Garrett, who hated writing, produced 3 full pages. Eleanor Pike came to visit and offered to testify. "I've known you long enough to see you're a good mother," Eleanor said. "Anyone with eyes can see that. And I'll say so in court if you need me to." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Thank me after we win." The custody hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday. Mara barely slept the night before. She dressed carefully in her best dress, brushed her daughter's hair until it shone, and tried to look like a woman who deserved to keep her child. The courtroom was smaller than the board meeting had been, but somehow more intimidating. Crow sat at one table with 2 lawyers. Mara and Silas sat at another with no lawyer at all because they couldn't afford one. The judge was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes. He looked at the paperwork, then at Mara. "Miss Whitlock, excuse me, Mrs. Mercer. You understand the nature of these proceedings?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you're representing yourself?" "We couldn't afford legal representation." The judge sighed. "Proceed, Mr. Crow." Crow's lawyer stood. He was smooth, polished, and devastatingly effective. He painted a picture of Mara as reckless, irresponsible, morally questionable. He cited her unmarried status when her daughter was born, her living arrangements, the rough nature of ranch work. "Your Honor, this child is being raised in an environment of constant danger. Livestock, machinery, men who carry weapons as part of their daily work. One accident is all it would take." "My daughter has never been in danger," Mara said. "Not yet, but it's inevitable in such an environment." "That's speculation, not evidence," the lawyer smiled. "Is it? Then perhaps you can explain how one of Mr. Mercer's employees was nearly blinded in a workplace accident just months ago." Mara's stomach dropped. They were using Lucas's injury against her. "That accident had nothing to do with my daughter," she said. "It demonstrates the dangerous nature of ranch work. And your daughter lives in the middle of it." The judge made notes. "Does the defense have witnesses?" Silas stood. "We have written statements from 15 ranch employees, all vouching for Mrs. Mercer's character and parenting." "I'd like to hear from one of them directly." Tom was called to testify. He walked to the witness stand looking uncomfortable in clean clothes. "State your name and occupation." "Tom Garrett. I'm a ranch hand at Iron Ridge." "How long have you known Mrs. Mercer?" 6 months, since she started working there." "And in your observation, how does she care for her daughter?" Tom didn't hesitate. "Better than anyone I've ever seen. That baby's always clean, always fed, always held. Mrs. Mercer works harder than anyone on that ranch, and she never once neglects that child. We've all seen it." "But you also work with dangerous equipment, correct?" "Yes, sir." "And Mrs. Mercer brings her infant daughter into that environment?" "The baby stays in the kitchen, nowhere near the equipment or livestock. Mrs. Mercer's careful, always has been." The lawyer smiled. "But accidents happen, don't they? You yourself witnessed a severe injury." "That was fence wire, 20 yards from the kitchen, not even close to where the baby was." "But it demonstrates that ranch work is dangerous, always has been. But Mrs. Mercer keeps her daughter safe, that's what matters." The lawyer tried to twist Tom's words, but Tom held firm. When he finished, Eleanor Pike testified. Then Cody, each of them painting a picture of Mara as responsible, loving, careful. But Crow's lawyer had one more weapon. Your Honor, I'd like to call Dr. Samuel Morrison to testify. A man Mara had never seen stood. Well-dressed, educated-looking, carrying a leather folder. Dr. Morrison is a specialist in child welfare, the lawyer explained. He's reviewed this case and has concerns. The doctor took the stand. Based on my review, I believe this child would benefit from a more stable environment. The mother's history, unmarried, transient, working in an isolated location, suggests potential for neglect or harm. You've never met my daughter, Mara said. How can you assess her welfare? I don't need to meet her to understand the risk factors. So you're making judgments based on assumptions? I'm making judgments based on professional experience and statistical probability. The judge looked at Mara. Do you have any expert witnesses to counter this testimony? No, Your Honor. I can't afford experts. I can only offer the truth. And what is the truth, Mrs. Mercer? Mara stood. Her daughter was with Eleanor in the back of the courtroom, but she could feel her presence, could feel the weight of everything that mattered hanging on what she said next. The truth is that I love my daughter more than anything in this world. The truth is that I work hard every day to give her a home, food, safety. The truth is that she's thriving. Anyone who's actually seen her can confirm that. She looked directly at Crow. And the truth is that this isn't about child welfare. It's about punishing me. Mr. Crow has tried everything else to drive me away, and when none of it worked, he went after my child, because he knows that's the one thing that might make me leave. That's a serious accusation, the judge said. Then let him deny it. Let him explain why he cares so much about one child's welfare, but has never shown concern for any other child in this county. Let him explain why this lawsuit happened the same week the territorial governor launched an investigation into his business practices. Crow's face went red. His lawyer started to object, but the judge raised his hand. Mr. Crow, is there any truth to Mrs. Mercer's allegations? Your Honor, my concern is genuine. That's not what I asked. Is there a personal conflict between you and Mr. Mercer? Silence. Mr. Crow? We've had business disagreements, yes. And this custody petition, is it related to those disagreements? More silence. The judge closed his folder. I'm going to take a recess. We'll reconvene in 1 hour. The hour felt like days. Mara sat in a side room with her daughter, feeding her, trying not to think about what might happen. Silas paced. Eleanor prayed quietly, though Mara couldn't bring herself to join in. When they returned to the courtroom, the judge looked grim. I've reviewed all the testimony and evidence, he said, and I've made a decision. Mara's heart stopped. This petition is denied. Mrs. Mercer retains full custody of her daughter. Relief hit so hard Mara almost fell. Silas caught her elbow, steadying her. However, the judge continued, I want to be clear. This decision is based on the lack of concrete evidence of harm or neglect, not on an endorsement of the current living situation. Mrs. Mercer, you would be wise to consider whether your current environment is truly the best option for your child. It is, Your Honor. Then prove it, because if this case comes before me again, I will scrutinize it much more closely. Crow stood. Your Honor, my decision is final, Mr. Crow. And I'll add that bringing custody cases for personal reasons is an abuse of this court's time and resources. I suggest you remember that. Outside the courtroom, Mara held her daughter and let herself breathe for the first time in weeks. You won, Eleanor said. We won, Mara corrected. All of us. The ranch hands were waiting at Iron Ridge when they returned. When they heard the news, Cody actually cheered. That night, Mara made a feast, the biggest, most elaborate meal she'd ever attempted. And when everyone sat down to eat, she stood at the head of the table. Thank you, she said simply. All of you, for everything. You don't need to thank us, Tom said. You're family. That's what family does. Family. The word settled over Mara like a blanket, warm and solid and real. After dinner, Silas found her on the porch. Hell of a day, he said. Hell of a few months. They sat in silence, watching the sun set over the ridge. Her daughter slept against Mara's chest, peaceful and unaware of how close they'd come to losing everything. You think Crow's done? Mara asked. No, but I think he knows now that we're not easy targets. Silas looked at her. You stood up to him in open court, made him look like exactly what he is. That's going to cost him more than money. Good. Yeah, good. The stars came out, sharp and bright against the dark sky. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. The ranch settled into its evening rhythms. And Mara Mercer, the woman who had arrived with nothing, sat on her own porch, holding her daughter, surrounded by people who had chosen to stand with her. She hadn't just survived, she'd won, and winning felt better than she'd ever imagined. The peace lasted exactly 11 days. Mara was in the kitchen making bread when she heard horses approaching. Too many horses. She wiped her hands and looked through the window to see 6 men riding up to the main house. They wore badges. The one in front was Sheriff Daniels, a man she'd seen around town but never spoken to. Silas met them in the yard. Mara stepped onto the porch, still holding the wooden spoon she'd been using. "Morning, Sheriff," Silas said. His tone was careful. "Mercer, I've got a warrant here. County inspectors authorized a full property evaluation. We'll be examining the ranch, the buildings, and all records." "On what grounds?" "Safety violations. Someone filed a complaint about conditions here being hazardous to minors." Mara's stomach dropped. Crow wasn't done. He'd just changed tactics again. "That's ridiculous," Silas said. "You know it is." "Maybe, but I've got a job to do." The sheriff dismounted. "This is official business. You can cooperate, or I can get more deputies. Your choice." Silas looked back at Mara. Their eyes met. She saw the exhaustion there, the weight of fighting a battle that never seemed to end. "Fine," Silas said. "Do what you need to do." The inspection took 4 hours. They went through everything: the kitchen, the bunkhouse, the barn, the equipment shed. They measured, photographed, made notes. One deputy examined the stove and declared it a fire hazard. Another found a loose board in the porch and marked it as a safety violation. They cataloged every minor flaw, every small imperfection, building a case against the ranch one detail at a time. When they finally left, Silas sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. "They're going to shut us down," he said. "Maybe not today, but they'll find enough violations to justify it eventually. How much would it cost to fix everything they found?" "More than I have, way more." He looked up at her. "I'm sorry. I thought marrying you would solve this. I thought we could outlast him. But Crow's got resources I can't match. He's going to win." Mara set down the spoon. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage that had been building for months. "No," she said. "What? He's not going to win. I won't let him." "Mara, we don't have options left. Then we make new ones." She started pacing. "Crow's been using the law against us because the law is in his pocket. The judges, the sheriff, the inspectors, they all answer to him. We can't beat him that way." "So how do we beat him?" "We stop fighting his way and start fighting ours." She stopped pacing. "We go directly to the people. We tell them what's really happening. We make it impossible for Crow to hide behind legal paperwork and bureaucracy." "How?" Mara thought. Her mind raced through possibilities, discarding ideas as quickly as they formed. Then something clicked. "The territorial governor's investigation. It's been what, 5 weeks since we sent him our findings?" "About that. So the investigation is underway, which means there's an official file, official records, things that can't be easily buried." She leaned forward. "What if we wrote to the territorial newspaper, told them everything, not just about Crow's business dealings, but about what he's doing to us, made it public?" Silas considered. "That's risky. If the newspaper doesn't pick it up, we've shown our hand for nothing. And if Crow finds out we're trying, he already knows we're fighting back. What's he going to do that he hasn't already done?" Mara sat across from him. "I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of defending when we should be attacking. Let's put him on trial in the court of public opinion and see how he likes it." "You're assuming people will care. Some won't, but some will. And that might be enough." That night, Mara wrote the letter. She didn't sleep until it was finished, 8 pages detailing everything that had happened since she arrived in Red Hollow. The rejections, the dead crow, the cooking competition, the lawsuits, the custody battle, the inspections. She named names, cited dates, laid out a pattern of harassment that was impossible to ignore. At the end, she wrote, "Vernon Crow is not protecting this community. He is terrorizing anyone who refuses to submit to his control. And if good people continue to stay silent, he will keep doing it. Not just to us, to the next person who stands in his way, and the next, until there's nobody left with the courage to say no. She sealed it, addressed it to the editor of the Territorial Herald, and sent it by courier the next morning. Then they waited again. Waiting was becoming a familiar torture. 3 weeks passed. Ranch work continued. Mara cooked, cleaned, cared for her daughter. She and Silas fell into a routine that felt almost normal. They worked together, ate together, talked in the evenings about small things, weather, cattle, plans for next season. Her daughter was growing, starting to smile at faces, grabbing at things with clumsy hands. Mara named her finally, Rose, simple, strong, pretty without being fragile. The ranch hands took to calling her Rosie, which made Mara smile despite everything. One evening, Mara was feeding Rose when Silas came in holding a newspaper. "It published," he said quietly. Mara's heart jumped. She took the paper with shaking hands. There on page 3 was her letter, not edited, not softened, every word exactly as she'd written it, under the headline, Justice or Vendetta, a frontier woman's fight against local power. "Oh," she breathed. "Read the editorial on page 4, Silas said. She flipped pages. The editor had written an accompanying piece calling for investigation into whether Vernon Crow had abused his position and influence. It stopped short of accusing him directly, but the implications were clear. "This is going to explode," Mara said. "Yeah, it is." The explosion came faster than expected. By the end of the week, the story had been picked up by 3 other territorial papers. People started arriving at the ranch, other families who had stories about Crow, journalists wanting interviews, even a representative from the governor's office who spent an entire afternoon asking questions and taking notes. Red Hollow split into camps almost overnight. Some people rallied around Crow, insisting he was being unfairly targeted by a troublemaker. But others started speaking up. Shop owners who had been forced to deal exclusively with Crow's businesses, families who had lost land to suspicious transactions, workers who had been cheated out of wages. The dam had broken, and once people started talking, the flood couldn't be stopped. Eleanor Pike showed up at the ranch one afternoon with news. "Mrs. Voss quit the Ladies' Society," she said she couldn't support an organization that had been silent while Crow harassed a young mother. "Mrs. Voss? The woman who came here to tell me I was setting a bad example?" "The same. Seems she has a daughter who married young and struggled. Your story made her think about what could have happened to her own girl if she'd been less lucky." Eleanor smiled. "People can surprise you." More surprises followed. Lucas appeared one morning with a dozen other young ranch hands from neighboring properties. "We heard you might need help with repairs," he said. "Figured we'd offer." "I can't pay you," Silas said. "Didn't ask for pay. Asked if you needed help." They spent 3 days fixing everything the inspectors had flagged. The loose board on the porch, the stove ventilation, the fencing around the equipment shed. By the time they finished, the ranch was in better condition than it had been in years. Mara cooked for them every night, giant meals that used up her carefully hoarded supplies. She didn't care. These men were fighting Crow the only way they knew how, by making it harder for him to find legitimate complaints. The territorial investigation moved faster after the newspaper coverage. 2 investigators arrived in Red Hollow and spent a week examining county records, interviewing business owners, building a case. Vernon Crow fought back. He filed defamation suits against Mara and the newspaper. He gave speeches at town meetings about protecting Red Hollow's reputation. He pressured business owners to publicly support him. But something had shifted. The fear that had kept people silent was cracking, not gone, but weakened. The breaking point came on a Wednesday. Mara was in town buying supplies. She'd found a small store willing to sell to her now, when she saw a crowd gathered near the courthouse. She pushed closer and saw Vernon Crow standing on the steps, addressing maybe 50 people. "This woman has brought scandal to our town," he was saying. "She has made false accusations, destroyed reputations, and created division where none existed, all because she refuses to accept responsibility for her own poor choices." Mara felt the familiar anger rising, but before she could speak, someone else did. "That's not true." A woman stepped forward. Middle-aged, well-dressed, someone Mara recognized as Mrs. Helen Curtis, wife of one of the larger landowners. I've stayed quiet too long, but I can't anymore. Mr. Crow, you used similar tactics against my family 10 years ago when my husband wouldn't sell you water rights. You spread rumors, filed complaints, made our lives miserable until we finally gave in. She looked around at the crowd. How many others here have similar stories? Silence. Then another hand went up. Then another. Then 5 more. Crow's face went red. This is a coordinated attack. No, Mrs. Curtis said firmly. This is people finally telling the truth. You've controlled this town through fear and intimidation for too long, and we're done pretending we don't see it. The crowd murmured agreement. Not everyone. Some still looked away, uncomfortable. But enough people were nodding, enough faces showed recognition that the tide was visibly turning. Crow looked directly at Mara. The hatred in his eyes was pure and undisguised. This is your doing, he said. No, Mara replied. This is yours. You created this situation. I just refuse to disappear quietly. You'll regret this. I already regret plenty, but standing up to you isn't one of them. Crow left without another word. The crowd dispersed slowly, people talking in small groups. Several women approached Mara, thanking her quietly. One of them was Mrs. Voss. I owe you an apology, Mrs. Voss said stiffly. I judged you unfairly. Yes, Mara said. You did. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just acknowledgement that I was wrong. She paused. My daughter is in a difficult situation. Married to a man who drinks. He's not violent yet, but she's scared. I've been telling her to be a good wife and endure, but after reading your story, I realized I was telling her to accept something unacceptable. She looked Mara in the eye. You showed me what real courage looks like. Thank you. She walked away before Mara could respond. The territorial investigation concluded 6 weeks later with a report that made front-page news across 3 territories. Vernon Crow had indeed hidden business ownership through relatives and shell companies, avoided thousands in taxes, and used his influence to suppress competition. The report stopped short of recommending criminal charges. There apparently wasn't quite enough evidence for that, but it recommended heavy fines, business restructuring, and removal from several county positions. More importantly, Crow's reputation was destroyed. The man who had ruled Red Hollow through fear and respect now inspired neither. People who had once deferred to him now challenged him openly. Business owners refused to exclusively deal with his companies. The social power that had been his primary weapon was gone. He fought back with lawsuits and complaints, but without his network of influence, they went nowhere. One by one, his cases were dismissed or settled unfavorably. 3 months after Mara's letter published, Vernon Crow left Red Hollow. Rumor said he moved to a different territory where his reputation hadn't preceded him. Some said his own family had pushed him out, tired of being associated with scandal. Mara didn't care where he went, she only cared that he was gone. Life at Iron Ridge changed after Crow left. The constant tension lifted. Mara could go into town without facing hostility. The ranch wasn't under perpetual threat of inspection or lawsuit. They could simply work and live without looking over their shoulders. But the changes went deeper than just absence of conflict. Women started showing up at the ranch asking for Mara. At first, she didn't understand why. Then she realized they wanted to learn. How to cook, yes, but also how to negotiate, how to stand firm, how to exist in the world without apology. I don't know how to teach that, Mara told Eleanor. You don't have to teach it. You just have to keep doing it. They'll learn by watching. So Mara started holding informal gatherings in the kitchen on Sunday afternoons. Women came to cook, to talk, to share their own stories. Some were struggling in marriages they couldn't escape. Others were widows trying to survive alone. A few were young and looking for examples of what life could be beyond what they'd been told was acceptable. Mara didn't give advice. She just listened and shared her own experiences honestly. The failures alongside the successes. The fear alongside the courage. The reality that survival wasn't pretty or perfect. It was messy and hard and required making choices that nobody should have to make. You know what you're doing? Silas asked one evening after a particularly large gathering. What? You're building something, not just for yourself, for all of them. I'm just talking. No. You're showing to them that it's possible to fight back and survive. That's more valuable than any advice you could give. The ranch itself grew more prosperous. With Crow gone, Silas was able to secure better prices for cattle, negotiate fair deals with suppliers, and hire additional workers without facing sabotage. The men stayed longer, worked harder. The place felt less like a refuge and more like home. Mara's relationship with Silas shifted gradually. They were still business partners, still maintained separate bedrooms, but the boundaries between them grew softer. They started sharing morning coffee before anyone else woke up, talking about more than just ranch business, learning each other's histories in pieces. One night, 6 months after Crow left, Mara found Silas on the porch again. It had become their spot, the place they went when conversation needed space to breathe. "I've been thinking," he said. About? About this marriage. What it is. What it could be." Mara's heart beat faster. "What do you mean?" "When we got married, it was practical, a solution to a problem, and that was fine. That was what we both needed." He looked at her. "But I think somewhere along the way, it became something else. At least for me." "Silas, I'm not asking for anything. I'm just being honest. You should know that when I look at you now, I don't see the cook I hired to solve a problem. I see my partner, someone I trust completely, someone I—" He stopped, seeming to search for words. "Someone I care about, more than I expected to." Mara didn't speak for a long moment. Her first instinct was to deflect, to keep the walls up, to protect herself from the vulnerability that came with admitting feelings. But she was tired of walls, tired of protection that came at the cost of connection. "I care about you too," she said quietly. "I didn't expect to, didn't plan for it, but somewhere between fighting Crow and building this life, you became more than just the man who gave me a job. You became someone I want to build with, not just survive alongside, actually build. So what do we do about it?" "I don't know. I've never done this before. Any of it." She looked at him. "What do you want?" "I want this to be real, not just on paper. I want us to actually be married, partners in everything, not just on official documents." "That scares me." "Me too." "What if we mess it up?" "Then we mess it up. But at least we'll have tried." He reached for her hand. "I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be willing." Mara looked at their joined hands. His was rough, calloused from work. Hers was the same. They were both scarred, both marked by the lives they'd lived before finding each other. "Okay," she said. "Let's try." The change wasn't dramatic. They didn't suddenly move into the same bedroom or start acting like newlyweds. But the shift was there, in the way they looked at each other, touched in passing, made decisions together instead of separately. Rose took her first steps in the kitchen while Mara was making bread and Silas was reviewing ledgers. They both stopped what they were doing to watch, and when Rose fell on her bottom, they both laughed. "She's going to be stubborn," Silas said. "She comes by it honestly." "Yeah, she does." The first year passed, then the second. Life settled into rhythms that felt permanent. Mara's Sunday gatherings became an institution. The ranch continued to prosper. Rose grew into a toddler with opinions about everything and fear of nothing. One afternoon, Mara was in town when she ran into Mrs. Curtis again. "I wanted to tell you something," Mrs. Curtis said. "My daughter, the one who was so miserable with her husband, she left him, took her children and moved back home with us. It wasn't easy. People talked. But she's safe now. And she told me she only found the courage because of your story." "I'm glad she's safe," Mara said. "More than safe. She's starting over, opening a seamstress shop, supporting herself." Mrs. Curtis smiled. She said she realized that a hard life lived on your own terms is better than an easy life lived on someone else's. I think she learned that from you. After Mrs. Curtis left, Mara stood in the street thinking about what she'd said. About all the women who had come through her kitchen, sharing their stories and their fears. About the ways small acts of courage could ripple outward, affecting people you'd never even met. She had arrived in Red Hollow with nothing. No home, no money, no prospects. Everyone had expected her to fail. Some had wanted her to fail. And for a while it had looked like they'd get their wish. But she hadn't failed. She'd fought. And in fighting, she'd discovered something crucial. Power didn't belong to the people who inherited it or bought it. Power belonged to the people who refused to surrender it. Vernon Crow had tried to erase her because he believed that power came from control, from forcing people to submit through fear and pressure. But he'd been wrong. Real power came from refusing to be erased, from standing up and saying, I exist, I matter, and you can't make me disappear. That night, standing in the kitchen that had become the heart of Iron Ridge Ranch, Mara realized she'd done something she'd never thought possible. She'd created a home, not just a place to sleep or work. A real home, built on honesty and struggle and the kind of belonging that only came from choosing each other day after day. Silas came in carrying Rose, who was almost asleep on his shoulder. Long day? Mara asked. Good day. Tom says that the North pasture is ready for spring rotation. Cody wants to try breeding a new cattle strain. Garrett actually smiled at something. Twice. Garrett smiled? Are you sure you didn't imagine it? Pretty sure, though it was brief enough that I might have blinked and missed it. They both smiled. Mara took Rose and carried her to bed, tucking her in with the worn blanket that had traveled across 3 territories. When she came back, Silas was making tea. He handed her a cup without asking if she wanted it. He just knew. That was what home felt like. Not grand declarations or perfect moments, just someone who knew you wanted tea before you said it, someone who stayed when everyone else left, someone who saw you at your worst and chose to keep seeing you. What are you thinking about? Silas asked. About how far we've come, about how none of this was supposed to happen. Regret it? Not even a little. They sat at the table, the same table where Silas had first offered her the job, where she'd cooked countless meals, where she'd cried and planned and fought. It was scarred and worn, marked by the life that had happened around it. You changed this place, Silas said. Changed me too, if I'm being honest. Before you came, this was just a ranch, a business, something to defend, but not something to care about. Now it feels like it matters, like what we're doing here means something. It does mean something. We took a place built on isolation and turned it into community. We proved that you can fight back against people who seem untouchable and actually win. She paused. And we showed a lot of scared people that survival is possible even when the deck is stacked against you. That's not nothing. No, it's not. Outside, the wind moved through the ridge, carrying the smell of coming rain. The cattle were settled for the night. The ranch hands were in the bunkhouse, probably playing cards and arguing about nothing important. Rose slept peacefully, safe and loved, and completely unaware of all the battles that had been fought to give her this life. Mara thought about the woman who had arrived here almost 2 years ago, hungry, desperate, carrying a baby and a trunk and nothing else. That woman had been willing to work for free just to prove she deserved a chance. She'd been so tired of fighting, so ready to accept whatever crumbs the world offered. She barely recognized that woman now. Not because she'd become someone different, but because she'd finally become fully herself. The person she'd always been underneath the fear and the survival instinct and the constant need to make herself smaller so others would accept her. She'd learned that acceptance from others meant nothing if you couldn't accept yourself first. That dignity wasn't something people granted you. It was something you claimed and defended. That home wasn't a place you found. It was something you built, piece by piece, with people who chose to build it alongside you. The world hadn't suddenly become fair. Red Hollow still had people who judged her, still had men who looked at her and saw only what they wanted to see, still had barriers that existed just because she was a woman trying to exist on her own terms. But those barriers didn't define her anymore. She'd learned to walk through them instead of around them, to break them down instead of accepting them. And in doing so, she'd shown other people that the barriers could be broken. That was the real victory. Not defeating Vernon Crow, though that had been satisfying. Not winning the cooking competition, or the custody battle, or the public opinion war. The real victory was proving, to herself and to everyone watching, that a woman with no resources, no connections, and no traditional power could still force the world to make space for her. She'd done it through courage, yes, but also through stubbornness, through refusing to apologize for existing, through cooking food that reminded people they were human and worthy of care, through standing in front of crowds and telling uncomfortable truths even when her voice shook, through staying when leaving would have been easier. And in the end, that stubbornness had transformed into something larger, a network of women supporting each other, a ranch that functioned like family, a marriage that had started as strategy and grown into partnership, a daughter who would grow up knowing that her mother had fought for her right to exist exactly as she was. Silas reached across the table and took her hand. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," Mara said, and she meant it. "I'm okay." They sat in comfortable silence, drinking tea, watching the last of the daylight fade. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, fences to mend, cattle to move, meals to cook. The work never ended on a ranch, the struggle never fully stopped. But that was okay, because Mara had learned something crucial in the brutal frontier town of Red Hollow. Life wasn't about reaching some perfect endpoint where all the fighting was done. Life was about finding people worth fighting alongside, about building something that mattered even when it was hard, about refusing to let the world erase you just because it was more convenient for everyone else. She'd arrived with nothing and built everything, not through luck or charity or waiting for someone to save her, but through relentless, exhausting, beautiful refusal to disappear. And that, Mara thought, was enough. More than enough. It was everything.